The Secret Story of Him. Chapter 7. The True Meaning of Good Morning. My name is Patwa. I always have that name. They gave me girl or you there or even hey you bitch most days. But my mama called me Patwa because my tongue was sharp, cutting down lies quicker than any overseer's whip. I grew up in that hellhole called the Jones Plantation, in the sweat and stink of the kitchen, where I learned early that being quiet and quick might save your skin, but not your soul. I watched over the little ones, the babies that the overseers made and the masters claimed, their mothers screaming into their aprons, as their babies were ripped away to God knows where. I'd clean blood off their tiny feet when they'd been whipped for crying too loud. I prayed for strength, but prayers ain't stopped them overseers. They took my body like it was theirs to break, some nights one after another, and the worst of all, even some of my own, the men who should have stood with us, betrayed us to keep themselves alive. Every night, I lay awake tasting bow, plotting how I'd make them pay. I learned to work through the pain, scrubbing floors with torn hands and a dead heart. Some nights, I'd hear the overseers laughing, clinking glasses filled with wine I'd poured for them. I'd see the masters' wives sneer down at me, blaming me for their husbands' lust, while their children tugged at my skirt with sticky fingers. Hate festered inside me, hotter than the sun that scorched the fields. I wasn't a person to them. I was a vessel to spill their seed, a rag to wipe their filth. But I kept their faces in my mind, every smirk, every leer, every lash. I was waiting. My day would come. I'll follow him, crawl if I have to, bleed if it comes to that, anything to break these chains. I'll burn the world down if it means I get to taste freedom, even if it's just one single day. After the death of Dirty Dog John or any other enslaved person on the Jones Plantation, mornings carried no promise of renewal, only the certainty of suffering. Yet each day began the same, with hollow echoes of good morning passing from mouth to mouth. The phrase had a sinister origin, a cruel twist of irony weaponized by the oppressors. When an enslaved person died, it was seen among the enslaved as a release, a final escape from the hellish existence they endured. In whispers, they would call it a good morning, for the departed soul was finally free. But the plantation's master, Mrs. Bessie, turned this act of quiet defiance into mockery. Standing tall and gaudy in her satin dresses, she declared each death a celebration of her own twisted vision of mercy. Another soul returned to the Lord, she'd croon. It's a good morning for them. Say it, all of you say good morning. The overseers enforced this grotesque ritual with whips and sneers, driving the words from lips already cracked with thirst and bitten by fear. For the enslaved, good morning became a bitter phrase, heavy with double meaning. To say it was to obey, but to know it was to remember. In death, there was freedom, and in freedom, there was hope. Later that night, Him sat in the flickering light of a stolen candle, his heart pounding as he unfolded the old brittle newspaper he'd pilfered earlier that night. The candle itself was a prize he'd snatched from Overseer Lucky George's cabin, a place so steeped in horror that even the thought of entering it made him shiver. George's cabin, with its peeling paint and thick, musty air, reeked of sweat, blood, and unspoken atrocities. Every creak of the floorboards had felt like a scream as Him hurried to find something, anything he could use to see in the night. The newspaper was older, about 15 years past its prime, its edges brittle and yellowed. It had come from Mrs. Bessie's pristine parlor in the big White House. While sweeping near her chair earlier that day, Him had overheard her gossiping with one of her house mistresses about an old uprising. The way she clutched the paper with trembling hands had told him it was more than just idle chatter. After nightfall, He'd slipped through the back door and swiped it from her desk, his heart racing as if the walls themselves could see in. Now, in the silence of the slave quarters, the shadows of the past loomed large. The candlelight flickered against the rough wooden walls, casting distorted shapes that seemed to dance with the ghosts of Lucky George's victims. He tried to push those thoughts aside as he unfolded the newspaper, its yellowed pages crinkling in his hands. The headlines screamed accusations of rebellion. Nat Turner's massacre, a nightmare of Negro savagery. The words clawed at his mind as he read, the story unfolding like a forbidden prophecy. Nat Turner, a man born into bondage, just like him, had risen not as a victim but as a force of reckoning. A preacher with visions sent by God, Turner had declared war on the chains that bound him and his people. As he read, he couldn't help but think of Sinoe. Sinoe had always told stories about the preacher boy, weaving tales of Nat Turner's defiance and the rebellion that had sent shivers down the spines of the slavers. Sinoe had believed in Turner's strength, his fire, his God-driven purpose. Sinoe too had dreamed of rebellion. He had tried to spark his own uprising, but the price was his life. He still remembered the day they hung Sinoe in the square. It was 3 years ago today. I remember his body swaying as a cruel reminder to anyone else who dared dream of freedom. The paper confirmed the tales Sinoe had whispered in the quiet of the night. In 1831, Turner had led an insurrection that left Southampton County, Virginia, awash in blood. Armed with nothing but knives, axes, and their righteous fury, Turner and his followers struck under the cover of night, plantation by plantation. Nearly 60 white men, women, and children fell to their blades before the rebellion was crushed. The paper's tone was venomous, painting Turner as a monster. But to Sinoe, Turner was something else. He was a whisper of possibility, a flicker of rebellion that could not be snuffed out, even by death. The description of Turner's capture and execution was gruesome. After months of evading capture, he was betrayed and dragged before his captors. They tortured him, stripped him of his flesh, and scattered his remains as a warning. Yet, even in death, his name lived on, haunting the South like a restless spirit, kindling sparks of hope in the hearts of the enslaved. The candle flickered, casting shadows that twisted and writhed like the nightmares born in Lucky George's cabin. He felt a lump rise in his throat as he thought about the screams he'd heard from that place, the faint cries that had seeped through the walls onto many nights to count. The cabin had seen horrors no man could speak of without shuddering, horrors that had broken many before they even thought to resist. But tonight, in the dim light, surrounded by ghosts and fears, him held on to something stronger than despair. The newspaper crumpled in his hands as a wave of rage and awe coursed through him. Sinoe's stories, once just tales, now felt alive, burning within him like the stolen candlelight. Nat Turner had refused to bow. Turner had taken the chains meant to break him and turned them into weapons. Turner's name endured. To the enslaved, his story was not one of terror, it was a spark of inspiration. He felt something stir deep within him. It was faint, like the flicker of the stolen candle, but it was there. A whisper, a possibility, a mission. Now, as him read about Turner's rebellion, he saw the same defiance in those words. It was a thread weaving through time from Mama Kalisa to Nat Turner to Sinoe to him, and now to the remnants of their people. Turner didn't die for nothing, he whispered to the small group gathered around him a few nights later. Neither did Sinoe. They showed us that we can fight, that this life, this hell they've chained us to isn't all there is. We are more than this. The others nodded, their eyes glistening with tears and resolve. They had lost so much mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, and children, but they had not lost themselves. Hin's voice dropped to a fierce whisper. When they say good morning, they mock us. But we know the truth. Our morning will come, and it will be a good one, not because of death, but because we'll rise. Just like Mama Kalisa, Nat Turner, just like Sinoe, we will rise like the sunrise. Sinoe's only failure was that he trusted and loved everyone equally. And I won't make the same mistakes. He saw himself as the Nat Turner of the Jones Plantation. From the moment he first spoke to me, Sinoe promised that one day he would free us all from the clutches of the evil Mrs. Bessie and her overseers, especially Lucky George. Although Sinoe had been on the plantation for as long as he could remember, he had fragments of memories of freedom from his early childhood. Nat Turner became a god to Sinoe. He whispered tales of the ancestors visiting him in his dreams, sharing plans of rebellion. A rebellion like Nat Turner's, but one that would happen on the Jones Plantation. Sinoe Smith, as he called himself, believed he was destined for greatness. He had once heard that he was born on the Smith Plantation, a land of free men where Master Percy allowed every enslaved soul the chance to earn their freedom with time. So he took the name Sinoe Smith with pride. The Sinoe Smith Rebellion could have been front-page news, a symbol of hope and defiance. He would have loved that, but Dirty Dog John, named so because Mrs. Bessie forced him to live like a dog, betrayed Sinoe. Old John would receive scraps from the master's table for turning against his own people. I watched as Sinoe's body hung from a tree, left to rot, and served as a grim reminder of the price of defiance. The sight of Sinoe's decaying body seared into my memory, fueling my determination for revenge. One night, just as Sinoe had foretold, the ancestors came to me. In my dreams, Sinoe stood with Nat Turner and Mama Kalisa. They spoke to me, urging me to rise like the sun, to be swift, quick, and silent. Your mind is your key. Your key is your freedom, they said. The first step in my journey to freedom would be the sacrifice of old Dirty Dog John. When the deed was done and no one knew why or how John had died, I whispered, "Good morning," as hollow echoes of good morning passed from mouth to mouth. Good morning, John. The morning after John's death was unlike any other. Overseers stormed through the quarters, their voices cutting like whips, as they demanded answers. John's body had been discovered slumped outside the smokehouse, his face twisted in agony, lips foaming, and his breath long gone. Mrs. Bessie, wrapped in her gaudy satin, stood trembling on the porch, a handkerchief clutched to her mouth as if the stench of fear might choke her. Whispers rippled among the enslaved and overseers alike. Had he overdosed on milk of the poppy? It was known that some slaves hoarded the substance, choosing its dreamy haze over the pain of hunger. Or perhaps John had simply drunk himself into oblivion on the master's whiskey. No one could be sure, but the uncertainty hung like a storm cloud over the plantation. Hin stood among the gathered crowd, his face a study in blankness, though his heart beat fiercely beneath his ribs. He replayed the moment from the night before, how he had approached John with the sweet tea, his voice calm, steady, even friendly. "Drink up, John," him had said, offering the overseer the cup laced with the belladonna he'd ground into a fine powder. The plant grew thick in the shaded parts of the plantation, its glossy leaves and purple berries unnoticed by all but him. The poison worked just as he had planned, slipping into John's veins like a whisper, leaving no trace of a hand at work. As the man's laughter turned to choking gasps, him had walked away into the shadows. When the body was found at dawn, the others whispered, "Good morning," their words both a mockery and a warning. Among the enslaved, he entrusted only a select few with fragments of his plans, never the whole truth. Each piece was shared cautiously, like seeds scattered on fertile ground, but no one knew the extent of what he had begun. Now, as the overseers raged and Mrs. Bessie's voice cracked under the strain of false authority, him exchanged glances with those few. Their eyes met his, burning not with fear but with the glint of purpose. The fire was building quiet and seen, but inevitable. When it finally erupted, it wouldn't be contained, for now Ian stood silent, his mind sharp, his heart steady. The Jones Plantation would not be the same, and one day soon, they would all learn the true meaning of good morning.
You've been listening to The Secret, story of him from enslaved to the grave, the man who freed more slaves. Then Harriet Tubman, Chapter 7, The True Meaning of Good Morning. Thank you for walking with us through this chapter, a path carved in pain, resistance, and unapologetic Black power. If this story moved your spirit, honor it, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a piece of this living truth. Drop your truth in the comments. Your voice matters. Your voice is part of the revolution. Chapter 8 is waiting. Click the link in the description to continue the journey. If you believe in this work and if you feel its fire, you can support it directly. Cash App MyUtime. This isn't just history, it's resurrection. Let's keep the fire burning. Thank you always for your support.